Good morning and a very warm welcome to our audience. Thank you all for joining us on this webinar today. The topic of today's webinar is business continuity and disaster recovery and how you can manage risk and improve recovery when a disaster strikes. Although always important, the topics of business continuity and disaster recovery have never come into the limelight than it is right now. This is the reason why we wanted to jointly host this webinar with AWS, because AWS has so many proven solutions in this domain that can really be helpful for many of the companies out there. Before we proceed, I would like to introduce Cloud Kinetics briefly. For those of you who don't know us, Cloud Kinetics is a premier consulting partner of AWS. We have been in business since 2012, and we operate out of 8 locations worldwide. We are a digital transformation company and have helped many of our clients chart out their digital strategies. We are also a certified MSP, and we offer 24/7 managed services to our clients. Moving on, allow me to introduce our speakers for today. We are joined by Karthik, who is the founder and CTO of Cloud Kinetics. He is an avid business-oriented technologist who has been a cloud champion for well over a decade. We're also joined by Chirag. Chirag is CK's cloud sales manager based out of Singapore. He is a multi-certified cloud all-rounder and has spent his career in the cloud industry. He is also a very well-known speaker and mentors young cloud enthusiasts in his free time. It's my pleasure to also introduce Gaurav Sahi as our panelist today. Gaurav is a solutions architect at AWS and is a seasoned professional with over 17 years of global experience across multiple domains. Thank you, panelists, for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us today. Before I hand over the webinar to the panelists, let me just take you through the agenda for the webinar. We will start off with an introduction to BCP and DR. We will also discuss the merits and demerits of traditional DR models and how the challenges that CIOs face with them. This will be followed by cloud solutions offered by AWS in this area. And finally, we'll take you through a few case studies where CK has designed and implemented AWS-based solutions for BCP and DR for our clients. Please feel free to send in your questions and we will get to them at the end. With this, I invite Karthik to start the session. Karthik, the stage is all yours.
Yep. Thank you, Supriya. Everybody, Vanakkam, Namaste, good morning. Hope you're all doing well, or as well as can be in this scenario. Nowadays, how we do in India, before we start anything, we usually break a coconut to Ganesha. A slightly different example. Nowadays, we don't seem to be starting anything without a reference to COVID-19, right? A poor joke, but then that's how we start, right? So we also want to, one of the reasons most of us want to learn more about BCP, DR, contingency planning, risk insurance, you name it. In one of the good side effects of this particular disaster we had in the last 2 months is this, that we all want to be more aware of how we can manage situations. Obviously, I don't need to mention that it's a global pandemic, millions infected, 300,000 plus deaths and counting. And not since World War II has there been a disruption this long. One of the things that happened, right, from a business perspective, right, we all know that every single piece of our life has been turned upside down, from all the way from governance to regular, getting food. And, we know the plight of migrants in India. We don't want to go there. From a business perspective, the traditional, the majority of the work gets done in office model has been completely upended. Right? This holds from, those countries which are really, really all the way digital, from the Nordics to, countries who are still using a lot of pen and paper, like many Asian countries and African countries. Everybody has been affected to varying degrees. We'll talk about that in a bit, right? And this changed the way we think about just in case. The whole idea of, okay, do we need to invest this only for insurance, right? If it's only an insurance of in case this happens, that thinking has come up several notches with what's been happened. And I would say, one of the things we keep saying in the industry is 3 or 3.5 years worth of transformation topics and discussions with CIOs. Most of those has been either attempted or completed in the last 3 months. And I think that's one of the good things that's happened, right? But let's talk about outages a little bit more, right? So this is not the first time it's happened. We, obviously the big ones stay in mind in that sense. But even taking locally, in the last 5 years, we have seen so many in India. Starting with at least the last I can remember, it was 2015, and before that was a 2004 tsunami. But that didn't affect business so much. The 2015 floods really affected us, right? And I can relate that as an example, because in our own business, in our own company, we are a 24/7 knock, and we are answerable to all our customers for managing their work on the cloud. And when Chennai got hit and people could not go to work, that was a big thing for us. Thankfully, we had a good example that time. We had just, I think, a few months before then, we had set up a knock, secondary knock in Coimbatore, right? And we were able to have employees go there and work from there and provide our customers the same service that we had promised them. But nevertheless, it was a good call for us, right, to see what can happen in our line of work. And some of the things that we improved from that were, make sure that the redundant knock was, at least partially staffed most of the time, right? We had employees work between the two locations, get comfortable with working in both the locations. We started giving more power and empowering the work from home option, basically getting all softwares and tools necessary on all laptops that employees could use at home. And that's something that a lot of companies are doing today. And then we brought about the whole idea of authentication, central authentication system based on cloud, a CAM based on cloud, so that employees could work from anywhere and get authenticated in a proper manner and then access our customers' assets. So this is a good example for us. And we had the further ones like 2016, we were able to handle without any engine impact. For our customer, one of our biggest customers in India, in Mumbai, 2019 floods was a big one. We had our team members working there as well. And the flood situation, I think it was about 3 to 4 weeks. People could not get to work, and they had to work from wherever they were. And so, from a customer model where they had really secure, hardened desktops, so to speak, separate LAN networks for accessing certain particular data. So now, they actually changed to a work from home model, virtual desktops, VPN for security. So that is a good preparation for them. And we were discussing with them actually 2 weeks ago, and we both were saying about how the preparation from last year really helped them for this year, because this was a very, very lengthy outage and still continuing in Bombay and Chennai, even the two cities that are still suffering, right? So the point is, I think one of the things here also is that the data point is that 50% of businesses have reported at least one day long, which is like 24-hour outage in the last 5 years worldwide. And that's no small number, right? So I think we got to get used to outages. We got to start preparing for them. It's not about a small, business loss. And also we need to be able to quantify the risks and losses. That's something I would say in India, we have not done that in a long time. Some of the countries, I would say technologically advanced countries, have at least paid lip service to them. We haven't gone there yet. And it's time we started doing that as well. And I'll come to the reasons in a minute. Now, okay, all this happened, right? We all of us took a hit. Who were able to cope better? And that's something that's a very interesting one. I think all of us can talk about examples. We're not talking only about, big companies, big tech here. You look at the companies that were able to handle it, from the small kirana shops to people who were able to transport goods to us. We have personal examples, right? The shop that we used to go to, which basically could not deliver anymore because they were all big shops where we had to go and buy, versus the quick ones that agreed to use Dunzo, right, to ship items to our house, and they were more than happy to get paid by Paytm and Google Pay, and they took our business, right? So there's a very quick grab of business by them, and that the traditional shops actually took a hit. At least in my example, I could not shop at my big traditional shops anymore. The tuition teachers and instrument gurus, right, dance teachers, they were all able to immediately, the younger ones, I would say younger ones, obviously everybody is pretty much good with technology nowadays, but more so the younger ones in those fields, the art fields, who switched to online lessons, Zoom and Skype, they continue to charge the same amount. Nobody cribbed about that, so they were able to do it, right? In our own line of work, electronic documentation, NDAs, SOWs signed by DocuSign, digital signatures, it worked so well, right? And where we could not do those businesses were asked to wait, right? We had to wait. We are still waiting for some. And even in this scenario, very ironically funny example is there are customers who still insist on sending us a physical check for us to go deposit in banks. And hopefully they're still lying with our courier, or if the couriers even worked, right? Even now, some cities couriers don't deliver. So that's the negative side. So the thing is, we clearly saw in this one how customers or businesses which embrace the latest technologies, e-logistics, like I said, Dunzo, right? Fintech solutions like Paytm and Google Pay, online meetings, Zoom, using virtual desktops, and having a workforce that could work from home, right, or be mobile. That was a big difference. I would also like to mention a very big, very good enterprise customer was part of the TVS group. They had this infrastructure already in place. I want to mention them as a commendable example and something we could follow. I think 5 years ago they started moving their assets to the cloud, big e-commerce apps to the cloud. They had a lot of employees and servicemen and salesmen through the country who used VPN, Open VPN, to access their assets in the cloud. And now when this happened, all they had to do was 100 so employees who were sitting in the Chennai office, they had to work from home. And so the question of adding virtual desktops and also adding OpenVPN licenses, and they were in business. So that is one of our best examples of where one of our big customers were able to adapt very quickly to this without a major impact. And that's something, they had a plan, they had a contingency plan in place. And that's what I wanted to highlight here. Quickly, what's a BCP, what's DR? I think just for hygiene purposes, a DR is something that addresses the procedures to be followed during and after an outage, right? So when there's a big outage, what do we do? How do we document the steps? So do we follow that? And obviously we have this DR plan, we should have drills. And that's something, how do we get back on track given a major disaster is something that DR deals with. And it's almost a given that no business escapes at least a minimal loss with DR. The trick is how much do we care about, what do we plan for, right? So-called technical terms like RPOs and RPOs we can talk about, but how do we get back with the minimal loss? A BCP, on the other hand, it's a larger plan, right? It's a business continuity. It encompasses DR as well. It's a high availability, load balancing, real-time failover, clusters. So how do we design from the get-go to be able to avoid minimal, not only disasters, minimal outages, minimal impacts, right? And that's what BCP is about. And BCP is what we should really focus on. And DR is basically a part of that. Now, all this is good to hear, right? So we've been talking a lot of BCP and DR are not new topics. I would say they are 30, 40 years old in terms of, we do it every day, right? We actually follow it in our personal lives as well. I'll come to that in a minute. But there are challenges, and that's the one that we need to focus on. Why do we have challenges, right? So it's always the cost challenge. Even we agree that even in our lives, so think about, before I get to the slide details from a business perspective, let's talk about our own personal lives, right? There's always a backup plan we have for everything, for most of those things. But we draw a line. Where there's a cost, we draw a line. I wouldn't mind getting 5 to 6 copies of my house key because it's probably cheap, very cheap to get it done, the local guy on the street. But come to the car, which equally, right? Most of us lose our car keys or misplace our car keys and we end up searching for it. But we never think about, because every duplicate key, at least in these remote control cars, it costs thousands of rupees. So at the most we go for one. I have not seen many people who go for 4 or 5 car keys, right? So what does it mean? So we try to see which is of value, and we also assess the risk impact. What is the chances of losing something, right? And what is the impact, right? If we can't find our car keys, chances are we'll take a taxi for that day. But if we lose our house keys, we can't get in. So that's more critical. So we don't buy, and it's also low cost. So there's a big play between the cost investment, the risk, and the impact due to risk, right? So that's something that applies in business as well. If you take a traditional business in IT, and we focus on IT here, you talk about redundant DR facility, the duplicate hardware setup, which is production grade. And we also want to think about what could be the future. We obviously, even for production, we spend a big capital amount trying to build for the future. And now we're doing the same thing for DR. This is the primary reason we hear many companies shying away from the big DR investment and pushing it for a rainy day, so to speak. And then some of these companies have these, especially the ones that deal with customer data and finance and ERPs like SAP, they have auditors coming in and asking, hey, what's your DR plan? Right? Do you have a 7-year plan for storing your records? And then they scramble to find something and they take a hard disk copy or a tape drive copy. But the real DR is still not there. It's only a backup of data. Then once you do that, there's a maintenance, right? So there's a periodic DR drills, and then it's not only putting together a plan and investment. How do you run through the drill? And you need to keep the processes updated as you grow and as more and more things are added to your system. And that's where a lot of companies and the good things turns are, because after some time you have a turnover of employees, right? Whoever was handling it before is no longer there. He's not documented. He or she has not documented the process. How do you keep it updated? And it's not too much to say, but I think the time is coming when just like we started having chief information security officer, CISOs, because security has taken front and center stage approach in our digital lives. Then I think a lot of big companies have it already, but we will all go towards somebody as a role, something like a risk management officer, right? Somebody has to take on that role and think about all these things and keep it updated. And I don't think that's something we can push off for too long, now that we have seen so many in the last few years. And then, as I spoke about the redundancy part, just how much do you plan, right? Do we plan for the whole Japan, right? So entire setup again, or do we just have a data backup, have a quick way? A lot of customers do, hey, look, I need a database backup because I know database is central. I can always quickly spin together my application. I have the latest code somewhere. So it's all appetite, risk appetite, and how quick you think you can get back together on your feet that matters. But like I said, how many levels of backup, right? What's your RPO, RTO, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, right? So how quickly do we want to get back on our feet? What is the point? How much data are we willing to forego, right? How much, right? So for e-commerce, it's practically, you don't want to lose anything. Obviously, the cost is more, right? You are talking about near real-time replication of data. There's so many options in the cloud that Gaurav and Chirag will talk about. But everything, obviously, you got to shell out dollars for that. So the balancing criticality and budgets are very important, and this is something the CIO, CTO faces. But here's the other side, right? These are the possible adverse events. We are only talking about, so far the big disasters. In India, at least, we have not heard. I need to choose my words carefully. We haven't heard that many, but the situation is changing. If you talk to the banks and the courts, we know how many banks, for example, how many businesses get hit, right, by malicious attacks day in and day out. It's much more public in the West, especially big companies, we get to hear of them, but it happens nevertheless in India as well, right? So turnover of IT staff is something we spoke about. The risk is process handover and we lose system control. System failures happen, disk crash, server failures, data corruption. Somehow in the past so many years, we were okay, we had a certain plan. We said, okay, we have a contract, we have an SLA with a managed services vendor who would say, I would replace your disk within 24 hours, something like that. But I don't know, with increasing digital business, is 24 hours too long? Maybe it's too long, we cannot wait. So that's a loss of service because it means, and also means loss of business. Malicious attacks, data hacks, ransom attacks. These are the things that have been happening so much in India, and this is something that's going to continue happening, and we need to prepare ourselves. For each of these adverse events, there's a risk, and the ones I listed here, who's answerable? The CIO, CTO, right? Because while things are humming along, the business always says, do we need to throw so much money into just-in-case planning, as I like to call it? But then when something happens, the first people who are questioned for the planning or lack of planning is the CIO, CTO. So it's as consultants and as people being in this business, this is something we always try to talk to a CIO, CTO, and if we need to go in and also give them the case, right, the business case to empower their discussions with the board and the investors, this is something we do. And this is something I think we all should keep in mind, that these challenges are always there, but we cannot let those challenges overcome our discussion. We need to be able to highlight this and get the discussion towards how do we plan for it. So taking cost and flexibility as the two big points, right? Before I hand over to Gaurav, here is where we're talking about how do we assess, right? And how do we assess this cost? How do we assess what's happening in the traditional scenario? And when you compare with the cloud, what are the advantages? And this is, if you look at it, enterprise grade. Initially, when the cloud started, right, when customers started talking about cloud, some of those things was, is it enterprise grade? I use this, big Veritas backup platform. I want to know if I can get all these bells and whistles in the cloud. And when some of those were not there, that's one reason for us not to go to cloud. But now it's not, that can't be the case either, because cloud, I think, has comparable features, if not better, right, with your enterprise grade backup platforms. And that's only one part. The total cost of ownership, there's a big difference, right? And that goes with the flexibility. You can have so many options in the cloud depending on how you assess your risk, how much you want to plan for, how much you want to pay for. There's so many options. That's a big difference between a cloud and an on-prem backup solution or a DR solution. And that's something that we should all, I think we'll all get to know more in the course of the discussion today. And that's something we should know more about so that we can make our business case for cloud-enabled backup and BCP. Right, the automated, the scripted backups and the scripted DR scenarios, these are all great things, they're all additional value adds in the cloud. But primarily I'm talking about the flexibility, right, the scalability and the total cost of ownership. This is something that I think is a very, very big factor that helps us go towards cloud. Not planning is not an option anymore, as I've been, I think, hopefully read it quite a few times. I think we are all aware. It's not like we've not been aware, but I think it's hit home this time and harder than any time else before. And why do we need to, right? So 3 points in addition to what is written on the slide, which you can see the slide. We are now today, even in India, I keep saying we in India, we are more digital than we think, right? In so many more ways than one. Our businesses are dependent on technology. We are more linked to the global economy than we know, right? Supply chains getting hit all the way from India, right? So everywhere is interlinked. We know what's happening between states now. We've seen it firsthand, right? And we know it's also interlinked to the global economy. So any hit here, you talk about India as a very, very big service industry now, right? So any hit to our business basically impacts our reputation with our customers, and that's going to play in future business. And most important point, our failures are more public than you want them to be, right? So anything happening in terms of ransomware attacks, big hits, we all know who are the winners, who really got hit, and it's all public. And that's again going to play on our reputation. And being digital, loss of reputation is the biggest thing that can hit us in the future. It's not just quantifying in terms of 1 day loss of revenue, 2 day loss of revenue. It's what can happen in the future that we should keep in mind, and that's why we should be more focused on. Let's make case here. We should be more focused on moving to the cloud. Right? The world is changing, and we have to. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm going to hand it over to Gaurav at this point, right? Where he's going to talk about all the features and the products that AWS Cloud in particular has to enable BCP and backup on the cloud, and then we'll have Chirag continue from there.
Thanks, Karthik. Let me just share my screen. Can somebody please confirm if they can see my screen now?
Yes, Gaurav, over to you. We can.
Thanks, Karthik. I think it's a pretty good overview of what the current situation is and why there is a need for backup DR solutions becoming a need of the hour. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for taking time for joining this webinar. Today, I'll be taking over remote working and backup solutions from AWS. So as you can see, I'm a solution architect with AWS based out of Bangalore. Been there with them for almost 3 years now. On the remote working, I'll be taking you through some couple of solutions in a bit more detail, but we'll see on what an overall solution package or the services sort of which you can leverage. In the current situation, we have been trying to actively help organizations to enable their remote work to students securely from home, because that's what's been happening for at least for the last couple of months, where people have been forced to stay at home, stay and work remotely from their perspective. The first one I will talk about is Workspaces. So Workspaces is a managed service. So basically it helps you create a desktop as a service running in the cloud for you, compared to managing the whole VDI infrastructure. The way when we call it a managed service, basically helps you take away the pain of managing a VDI infrastructure, managing OS patches, managing your upgrades, managing the in-fleet. That's where the beauty of managed services comes in. So it basically helps you leverage a full cloud desktop for your employees. If you look at, there are 3 flavors or 2 flavors primarily which are available. One is Amazon Linux, which is a Linux-based desktop experience. Second is the Windows Server 2016. Which basically give you a Windows 10 desktop experience. You can leverage services like Amazon Workdocs. You can there's an add-on bundle for Office. On the Linux side, you can look at say open source solutions like LibreOffice or Firefox for your connecting. You can also bring your own Windows desktop licenses to us and run them on a dedicated hardware, because that's what the way Windows licensing works. But there could be a common collaboration service which you can see WorkDocs, which can help you do content creation, content sharing, editing content onto the cloud directly. So for these, for the two desktop options that we had, we have these 5 bundles, which we call as the hardware bundles. So one of the first one on the left is a free tier bundle. The main ones are the standard, performance, power, and up to and that scales up to graphics, which is having the graphics capability as well. There are 2 pricing models to it. You can go for an hourly pricing model based on your usage, or you can go for a fixed monthly pricing model. And the other advantage from compared to other solutions where you have a normal data out, Workspace's pricing normally covers the data out charges as well. So you get a full-fledged desktop to work on your video, on your applications. You can bring your application as well. You can bring your licensed applications onto the desktop Workspace's bundles as well. The best part of Workspaces, all your existing tools remain as is, which means the employees can connect to the internet. You can define proxies or firewalls using some add-on solutions. You can connect Workspaces to your existing Active Directory or spin up a new Active Directory onto the cloud. You can continue using your MFA or the MFA solution or MFA access to the desktop. Or whether it's a software configuration management, or whether you want to apply say certificates onto the client devices where they connect to the workspaces. So all your existing infrastructure, or I'll say, and not infrastructure, but all your existing applications stay as is. The way you do it for on-premise, that remains the same for Workspaces. Just to cover a few features of the capabilities of Workspaces, Workspaces are available across all different platforms, whether it's mobile, tablets, PCs, Windows, Mac clients. There are clients available for almost all platforms. We do support zero clients as well, and the Chromebook devices. Especially for say from a contact center companies, we do support audio input, which means you can make Skype calls. You can put your agent to a workspace, and they can use that workspace to run your CRM, your call solutions, connect to the CRM solutions using the internet capabilities. You can build custom images for Workspaces. The other aspect of what we provide is a Workspaces application manager, which means you can distribute applications to all your Workspaces running across regions from a central place. It provides an API support. It gives you a CloudWatch and CloudTrail integration like a normal AWS, like all other AWS services. The other good part of Workspaces client is the client helps you do some kind of a self troubleshooting, which means client can try to connect to the network and infrastructure in the background using the network, and give you what all places it could be having an issues from a client side of things. And plus you have a health check website where you can see what kind of latency I'm hitting when I'm trying to access a certain Workspaces. There is no upfront for cost like in any other AWS services. There are 5 hardware bundles which we talked about. You can bring your own license. It's a good amount of compliance support which comes into Workspaces. And in fact, I have a comparison slide at the end of the deck after the end of the session. Basically compares the Workspaces with other solutions which I'll talk about. You can do your volume encryption. There are certification support for SOC 1, SOC 2, HIPAA, PCI DSS compliance. And all our services are GDPR ready across different regions. So Workspace is also one of them. The next one I'll talk about is AppStream. So in the Workspaces, we have been talking about a full-fledged cloud desktop experience for user. Now, suppose I have an requirement where I want to give only an application access to my users. That's where AppStream comes in. Compared to Workspaces, AppStream is a fully managed service, which means you don't need to even provision the infra specific to a user. You create a pool. Basically there are 3 main components of AppStream. You have an image builder, which helps you build either use a base image, or you can build your own custom images which you want to give to your users. Second is a fleet and stack, which basically means you create a fleet of VMs which are running for the service, and the stack helps you connect the fleet with your users, which means my users come and work, and the sessions and the infra spins up and the infra goes down automatically. So you don't need to even worry for my schedule start and stop. You need to worry for your managing the whole infra life cycle. That's where the fully managed part comes in. In terms of the so basically, what you can think of is you can think of delivering, say, a full-fledged desktop applications to your users in a very secure way using, say, nice DCV streaming protocols to any computer in the world. So I can deploy a custom image or publish a certain application, which I can then give it to my users to start working on without giving them a full desktop capability. The other good part is you can manage this whole from a central location, which means I can go and update my fleet with a new base image or a new version of an application. And the next time a user connects to the session, it gets a new image automatically. So there is no worries of deploying and updating the operating system for the other end user devices from your perspective. The way Workspaces, it also integrates well with your existing IT infrastructure. Basically, whether it's an Active Directory integration or a SAML integration to existing providers. And the way it works in terms of pool, it helps you kind of reduce your IT spending. If you look at in terms of the use cases, it can very well say help simplify application delivery. When I say simplify application delivery, so suppose a customer is already having a desktop application with them. They don't have a SaaS model which is ready for them, but they still want to go onto the cloud, which means we can simply port their application, make a custom image, and then make that cloud ready and stream that application towards the end user without even making a single line of code change into the application. That's to help them get to the cloud, and then maybe there could be a long-term plan of how we help them make or SaaSify their applications from a desktop application to a SaaS-based model. It can be very well leveraged for your 3D design and engineering applications, whether it's AutoCAD, CAM, softwares can very well be used. And the reason, there are two reasons why it can be very well used, because one, AppStream give you a graphics bundle. So you can very well leverage the graphics bundle, and only to the time you want to use the graphics bundle for you, because the session comes in and goes out automatically once the user logs off. Second, it uses nice DCV protocol, which basically takes the network variations into factor. So it gives you a fluid experience of to an end user while they're working on their application. There are a lot of software vendors who already have some quick starts running with AppStream. So if I'll encourage you to go to the AppStream portal and then see the software solutions which are available, which you can give it a try, take some demos, and start working on it. The fourth important use case for AppStream is basically when you're, say, working as an educational institute or, say, a lab where you're trying to give certain labs to your students for a certain duration, and then post that you don't require infrastructure. That's where AppStream plays a very important role. So because I can scale up and down to thousands of my fleet VMs without even worrying about paying till the time nobody uses it. And normally what happens in education institute, you normally have the students who connect to the labs only say last 2-3 months, and over the year the utilization is pretty low. So that's where these kind of services really help you optimize the cost of IT spend from your perspective. Since we talked about two services, one was a cloud-based desktop, the other was an app streaming protocol. How do I choose which one is right for me? So I've just tried to put a couple of comparisons of how we kind of look at whether I should go for Workspaces or whether I should go for AppStream. If you have a full cloud-based desktop requirement, you want a full use of full app and peripheral support, you want to get a persistent desktop experience, you have a certain compliance you want to adhere to, you want clients across different platforms which are available. I want to bring my own Windows 10 licenses to the cloud. That's where Workspaces fit in. AppStream on the other side, I just want to publish certain apps and I want my users to use only those curated set of apps. That's where AppStream fit in. I don't want a non-persistent, basically I'm looking for a non-persistent sessions for my users. That AppStream fit in. In terms of compliance, it does HIPAA and PCI DSS. Compliance, it gives you a SAML federation to your existing identity providers. So I think it gives you a very good view of when to use which services. And I'm just talked in detail about these two services, but if you look at There are other services which are available which can be used for your remote working and learning solutions, where be it WorkDocs. The WorkDocs is again a fully managed service from our side, which helps you basically create content, edit content, and share the content across your different employees within the company. Chime is basically your communication service which can help you to make calls, place calls, use your SDK into your applications to use that infrastructure to connect to the users. Amazon Connect is a fully managed contact center solution from us, which basically the idea is where we can help you uh, create a full-fledged contact center within minutes. Normally EP-based or a hardware-based solution takes months, but our idea of spinning up a full-fledged contact center within minutes, and so that you can make your first call, say, in a very quick way. Client VPN is basically for help you to connect your users to your cloud infrastructure and even to your on-premise infrastructure. So basically, it's like a client-side VPN, which helps you to connect with the VPN stays in the cloud, and you don't need to worry of managing the hardware, managing or scaling that hardware. Especially like if you look at from a COVID situation, where customers were struggling because the current VPN solution could not hold the load of scaling up and down based on the immediate user needs, and that's where client VPN plays a very important role, because it can scale up and down automatically without you need to worrying about the infrastructure. Couple of other solutions which are available on the cloud, which is Nutanix, XIFrame, or whether it's VMware or Citrix. I'll be not talking in detail, but there are quick starts available for all these solutions on our website, where you can just simply go and use those quick starts to get started very quickly. And we have the partners like Cloud Kinetics, who kind of helping customers go to these deploy these solutions onto cloud with ease. So that cover primarily the remote working and the solutions. Next, I'll be talking on the storage aspect of it, and why backup is important towards a cloud. So before I jump into the backup, let's understand why cloud is actually a right, or AWS cloud is actually a right choice for you to look at from a backup point of view. If you look at, we almost cover all three different storage classes, whether it's block storage class, object storage class, or a file storage class. And all these storage classes have their own different subcategories within them, which means I have plethora of options to choose and make my storage use the way I want to use for that specific workload. So the way we normally call it is the purpose-built databases, but our purpose-built mechanism remains consistent across, whether it's storage, whether it's backup solutions, whether it's remote working solutions, because we want to give you a flavor what you really need from your workload perspective. So if you look at EBS, which is on the left side, you have 4 capabilities, whether you want to go with, say, SSD or HDD or elastic. All of these are elastic volumes, which means I can scale up very easy without even having a downtime. On the right side, if you see, there's an EFS, which is Elastic File System. So which I don't even go and provision of storage for me. This grows automatically, and I can now we have this infrequent access for the category of data which is not frequently accessed by the application to help you optimize cost. On the object storage, we have S3. I think it's a very popular service of ours. And if you look at within S3, I'll go in the next slide a bit more detail. There are multiple storage classes which are available. Apart from these three traditional storage class types, we have a couple of more options, which is FSX for Windows, which basically is a managed service available to run a file server on Windows without worrying about a EC2 or a VM going down. Since it's a managed service, it basically keeps multiple copies and help you replicate the data within the region. Same way, we have FSX for Lustre, which is again a cluster-based storage solution. Now, if we zoom in a bit on the S3 itself, so you can see there are 6 storage classes which are available within S3 based on what you need and what the use case is. So you can start from standard, which is the hot tier. Basically, it's a actively frequently accessed data. The data gets replicated over multiple AZs, and it gives you an 11 lines of variability. Second one is intelligent tiering. I suppose I don't know which class my data should fit in, whether it should go into infrequent access, it should go to standard, it should go to Glacier. You leave that decision to this tiering class. Basically, the data moves the data from from one class to another class based on the data access patterns. So it takes that intelligent call on your behalf to move the data across different storage classes so that they get into the right storage class and help you optimize cost. And then we have something on the infrequent access zone. The last one I'll talk about a bit detail is they are meant to reduce your cost compared to standard significantly, because these are meant for archival purposes, but it gives you, and these are active archives, they're not passive archives, which means if I want to retrieve data from those storage classes, I can do it from minutes to an hour. There are different options which are available, which helps you whether it's retrieval within a minute versus a standard retrieval which is in hours, but it gives you an active archive capabilities. Deep archive is something which we brought in recently, that is again for very long-term compliance storage purposes, which means I need to keep my data say for 15 years, but I want to keep it the loss as a bare minimums of running my storage. So if you compare the storage pricing starting from standard to deep archive, you can see the variance coming in, but the base technology, the base service remains the same. It's just the class becomes a different for that storage data. The way the reason why we position S3 as the best mechanism to do backups, it gives you 11 lines of variability, which means my data gets replicated across multiple data centers or multiple availability zones within a region. And that's it's at least a six copies within the region. So basically my chances of my data getting corrupted, chances of my data losing my data are very, very low with S3. How do you look at, say, this slide talks about how do you see a traditional backup environment. So you have your on-premise data center where you have different application servers running, you have media servers running, and then you have tape storage and a local disk. So you take some local backup, then you take some tape storage backup, move the backups to some other locations, move your tapes to some other locations. It becomes a passive archival, because if you have to retrieve a certain record, you basically have to go back to the data bunkers, identify a certain tapes, and wish the tape works when you actually brought it in, because there are certain levels, generations of the tapes as well, and you have to keep moving your tapes across generations to keep them up to date. So it's a lot of mechanical and a lot of process oriented backup mechanism, and then which still is pretty passive, which means if I have to retrieve something, it takes days or weeks easily. Compared to say on cloud-based backups, what I'm talking is you have this corporate data center, which is again on the left side. Everything remains the same. You have your own backup software, you have your own backup partner software which are you running, but you leverage connectors to move the data into the cloud. Whether it's storage gateway is one of the connectors, whether it's say your partner solutions are one of the connectors to move the data, leveraging say different network technologies, which could be a direct connect, which basically is a network available over MPLS providers, or a VPN, or an internet, and going back to S3 or to S3 Glacier. If you look below, there are a lot of partners which you have in this space which help you do, and could be one of the partners which you're already using, say like Veritas, NetApp, which is already on premises working for you, and they have connectors to move the data into the cloud. I'll stress a bit on the storage gateway, because that's one of the native solutions which is available from AWS. Storage gateway basically can run either in on-premise in a virtualized environment, or you can run storage gateway on an EC2 onto cloud. It gives you two flavors. It gives you three flavors, in fact: file gateway, volume gateway, and tape gateway. The file gateway, basically the idea is, rather than building a file servers onto on-premise, you can building a storage gateway as a file gateway component, which keeps some local data and at the same time pushes the data back to the cloud as a normal file. So you can keep leveraging from a file perspective. Volume is basically I create a volume from a local drive, keep a local caching, and then those volumes can be used to spin up EBS snapshots. So this could be say an input to your DR solution, or this could be say managing your volumes and keeping the backup of your existing on-premise volumes to the cloud. And the last one is tape gateway. Basically what we're saying is so your tape softwares and the tape backup software remains as is, but instead of moving them into the tape drives and then moving the tape drives towards a data bunkers, we emulate a VTL which could be leveraged by the backup software and move the data into the cloud. To give you a bit more perspective on file gateway, So file gateway basically gives you an NFS and an SMB protocol support. It's something which is deployed either in your on-premise or onto the cloud. It gives you a local cache. You can support for S3 object lock. It easily integrates with existing applications like SAP, Oracle, HDFS, and you can easily restore backup from the cloud back to your on-premise when needed. And since the data sits onto S3, we can define lifecycle policies of what my data is active data or my hot data, or if I have some cold data which should move into Glacier or Deep Archives. So you can define the policies onto the S3 objects the way we define for normal objects. Tape gateway on the other side is basically emulates a VTL interface towards your backup software. So it's an iSCSI VTL interface which helps you move the tapes data rather than moving it to a physical tape library. We move the data using HTTPS communication protocol towards your S3 in the background, and all those tapes becomes vaults, and the tape which can be then emulated back to your software. So your everything on the left side of the backup server remains as is. So they see backup server is where you push all the backup in, and backup server sees tape gateway as one of the VTL to kind of get the data from. So data is compressed and encrypted on the transit and at rest on S3. So that basically covers your security capabilities as well. The another service which we launched recently is AWS Backup. So we have been having this different backup mechanism, but customers ask us, is there a way we can centrally manage my backup softwares across my different access patterns or different softwares? That's where the AWS Backup comes in. So it's a centralized backup management service from AWS. You can do a policy or a tag based backup solution. You can define automated backup policies. You can define a retention management policies. You can do a centralized backup monitoring and logs across my different services. Let me just quickly jump over to the services. So if you look at, we support EFS, EBS, RDS, DynamoDB, and Storage Gateway. And then there's certain set of capabilities which are mapped to each one of them. On the EFS, we do additional thing, which is to move the data into a core storage, which helps you further optimize your cost on pushing the data into the cloud. Apart from the few of the options which we talked about, these are additional options which are available to move the data in, starting from your Kinesis or S3 transfer acceleration, which basically helps you connect to the nearest POP location and then move the data into the AWS network. Snow family, I think, will be covered by Chirag in the subsequent decks. So just to sum up, what are the benefits of going for the cloud backup? It basically help you leverage your existing investments in infrastructure. It gives you a cost-effective offsite storage alternative. Basically, it's away from your on-premise, but it still gives you an option to optimize cost based on whether it's a hot tier data or a warm tier data or a cold tier data. It helps you eliminate the management of your physical tape backups, and data land about the data and basically help with your business use cases. With this, I'll hand over to Chirag to take you through the DR and the Snow family solutions. Chirag, over to you.
Thank you. Sure. Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, Karthik and Gaurav, for sharing about the importance of BCP, disaster recovery and backup. And again, thanks to you, Gaurav, for giving a walkthrough about the services which are available out of the box on AWS Cloud, which will help to design all the BCP, DR and backup strategy for any customer. So again, good afternoon, everyone. This is Chirag from Cloud Kinetics, and I'm based out of Singapore. And I am going to give you a walkthrough about like how as a partner, we are designing a solution for our customer on AWS for achieving the enterprise grade secure backup as well as DR strategy. So let's get started with the key factors which need to be considered for designing any disaster recovery strategy. As Gaurav explained about, lot of tools are available, and the table which you are seeing from left to right, it is a industry standard to plan about any disaster recovery for any kind of a system, but few points which need to be considered, which can impact or which will factor about how the critical backup or how the critical disaster recovery we need to design, ultimately it will impact how quickly we are going to recover and what it will going to a cost. So simply let's start it from the left side, that traditionally we are thinking only setting up a backup and in case of a disaster we are going to restore the data. As Gaurav also gave example of a traditional backup, like we are archiving our data into the bunkers and it will take some time, or time which can be a weeks or even months to get back to the data to the original location, and then it will be work in progress. But with the help of the cloud services as well as AWS, they are giving the option to utilize even the first column in the matter of a few minutes to the few hours. So it is traditionally the backup and restore. It's a very proven, but now we can set something known as a pilot light kind of a DR strategy on cloud, giving an example of your primary site is on premises, but you can design your pilot light for the mission critical component of your application or business on AWS cloud, and only those components which need to be really alive or really getting the real-time data sync from the primary site will be live. Other components can be in the stop state, and it will reduce the cost. But when the time of a disaster or failover come into picture, we need to consider that this will take some time, because we need to make a application state, everything into the up-to-date state, and we need to pull the data from the version control and build the infrastructure quickly. The beauty of cloud is because it's on demand and it will be quickly buildable. So pilot light is that factor. It will reduce the time from hours to tens of minutes. The next level is warm standby in AWS. So it is something the small scale but fully functional application or business logic is running on AWS cloud. When any disaster happen on the primary site, we can quickly rebuild or scale our AWS site in a full functional mode, and our business will be up and running. Again, it comes with the cost because the full functional infrastructure need to be run on AWS, and when the time of a scaling come into picture, matter of a few minutes, that is where the power of AWS cloud come into picture. We can change the size of our infrastructure in just a matter of a few seconds to a minute, and warm standby is fulfilling all these flexibility. The last one is multi-site, or it is very known as active in the industry. So it is something that we are running the full grade with the full-fledged infrastructure on AWS. In any case, if any primary site went down, so it will be running or redirected to the secondary site running on AWS at a full-scale mode, and the business will not feel the downtime, and the user experience will be the smooth and same. So these are the 4 key factors which need to be considered. Not again every business need to run at a multi-site, but AWS is giving all those services out of the box to build the disaster recovery strategy from all these 4 factors. Again, at the end, it will impact kind of a cost, because budget need to be considered for the disaster recovery. So we need to take all these 4 points into the consideration, how much the downtime or how much the recovery time a business can absorb. So let me go through the next. I would like to introduce here a tool named Cloud Endure. Previously, it was an independent ISV, but last year it was acquired by AWS. Now it become a first-class citizen in AWS Cloud, and it is following the suite AWS Cloud pricing mechanism, and it is reinvented by AWS now and very easy to use. We are heavily following Cloud Endure for our customers, because it's no longer a day that we do the manual designing and manual calculation that what kind of infrastructure is required, and because we also suggest to remove the more human error, it will be much better. So Cloud Endure is fulfilling those kind of thing. It is helping us to design the DR strategy for our customer in the automated fashion, and it is an easy to use tool it is helping in a lot of way to design the strategy, which will again following in those 4 key factors, whether it's a pilot light or warm standby or multi-site. This is the one tool I suggest that it will help to achieve all those targets. So a little bit about Cloud Endure, again, easy to use and fully automated, and it will remove the complexity of setting up again the complex networking structure. Let's say from the primary site is on the on-premises and moving to the AWS region. We don't need to set up any complex VPN or any networking structure to move. This is the agent-based tool, and it will work on SSL TLS, and the data is fully encrypted following the AES 256 encryption algorithm. So the data will be moved in a fully secure way, and it will store on AWS. And another beautiful thing about this tool is it will not only give you the failover, but also the failback. Let's say if you don't want to put no plan to put everything on AWS, it is just as your DR site, but again, when your primary site will come back, you want the primary site will get up-to-date data and data will be in sync. So fallback also happen automatically. Let me again give you a more walkthrough that how the Cloud Endure work and what is the overall architecture here. So Cloud Endure is a agent-based tool. Again, this agent work on most of the operating system as well as some legacy database system, proprietary database system, as well as open source system. This is an agent-based tool, and it is on the operating system level, whether your infrastructure is a hypervisor or the virtualized, or it is a physical one. This is the one agent which need to be installed, and while configuring this agent, we need to configure a blueprint, which is the configuration which will say that what kind of infrastructure or we want on AWS. So on the out of the box, we can say something staging area. We don't want that the same kind of infrastructure which we are running on premises, the same will run on AWS, because the infrastructure, when it will run, it will the bigger it will run, the more it will be costlier. But if we want some infrastructure which will be the small scale, again following the pattern of that warm standby or the multi-site, so we can configure in our blueprint, and in case of any disaster happen, it is just a matter of a automated failover. It will, in the matter of few seconds, the full scale infrastructure will be up and running on AWS, and the business will be again working like a charm. So the beauty is here with this tool. And another use case I would like to say that nowadays for the migration, this tool is also in heavy use, because as it is replicating from the block by block from the operating system, and it works parallelly. It is not that dependent one by one, but let's say if you have a 10 VM running on premises and you want to set up, or you want to migrate the whole 10 VM on AWS cloud, the agent work like the Cloud Endure agent will work like a charm. We can even configure how much dedicated bandwidth we want to put for the agent. Everything is configurable here. Important thing to note here that no reboot is required on the on-premises side, and it will not impact the performance of our on-premises site while configuring and installing the agent and while configuring the blueprint. So another thing is, as I mentioned, that this tool work on VM as well as the physical hardware. So this tool will automatically convert the operating system to work on AWS cloud. There we don't need to worry about that what kind of driver of hypervisor will work on AWS, because AWS is having a multiple kind of hypervisor with the new series. Something known as a Nitro system architecture is getting followed, which is much more performant and highly efficient. So the Cloud Endure is helping to automatically convert our older or maybe some different hypervisor provider to the latest one, AWS hypervisor virtualization layer, and it will work like a charm. So I would like to now introduce another service, and this is something like a physical service which AWS will ship to us, and it is something known as AWS Snowball. So it's me and I'm holding this Snowball. I can say, one of a very first person like who saw Snowball back in 2016 when it was released in India. It was a 50 terabyte at that time, but now it is coming as a 80 terabyte in a storage space, from which 671 terabyte is usable. The use case for this here is because moving the data from the internet or from internet, it can be a time consuming, and it depends upon the what kind of bandwidth we can allocate for the migration of data. And it may take even weeks and months to, let's say send multi terabyte of data. But this is the easy approach, because once we decide that we want to move our data, the one-time data on AWS cloud, we can order this. It will ship in 2 to 3 days to our location in India, and it supports all those standard connector like RJ45 and SFP. We need to configure, we need to put our data into, and it will ship back to the AWS facility. And this hardware is very powerful. It's like a suitcase around 20 to 22 kg, and fully encrypted. All those control in our hand, because it's our data. While moving, we can track each and every step, like where our data is or where the Snowball device is. And to even unlock, it is in our control. We need to configure the setting and setup in our on premises. And it is making the things much easier and secure. And rather than waiting for the weeks and months, it's a matter of a week to max 10 days for doing this process. Now coming to some case studies, this one is really very near, because this is something, because we are going through the current situation, as now work from home culture is the mainstream, and we are looking for, again, the centralized solution, cloud-based solution, so that people can work efficiently. So one of our customers is like that. They were using Workspace, which were explained by Gaurav, about getting a desktop at the same kind of experience, whether it's a Windows 7 and Windows 10. Even right now, the Linux GUI-based workspaces are also available. So this customer started using workspaces, not from this situation, but prior to few months prior to that. But the customer need more and more. Most of their users are, or their people are, workforce are remotely, and this customer lies in the media segment, and they are one of the OTT provider. So they are looking to make productive their team more and more. So the solution which we drive for them, because most of their data is already on AWS cloud, they are utilizing some other of their line of business application and system on AWS. So we design their workspace strategy, like what kind of user need to be rely, and what kind of powerful desktop need to be provided to what kind of user, because few users are kind of an editor who need the GPU powerful desktop to do the processing of the video, so that shows can be released, because shows were pre-recorded. And right now at OTT, and we all are relying every day on our favorite application to watch the serial and the seasons. So they have pre-recorded session. They don't want to interrupt their processing. So the same kind of experience, it is delivered on Workspaces, and all of the previous user which were relying on their local machine or local desktop, they also moved on AWS Workspaces, and it is the same experience. It is totally integrated with its central identity. There is no other username or passwords need to be followed. It's the same kind of experience which we delivered, and it reduced their cost, because let's say buying a new system and buying a new operating system licenses, it can be expensive, but it literally reduced costs there around 60% previously what they are spending on their buying the hardware, buying the software. And it improve the efficiency, because that data is also available on S3 and other locations, and the now desktop is also everything on same network, so nothing is going out of AWS network. It is inside, relying on same network. So team is getting more and more productive, and business is running in a much faster way. So the next case study I would like to share about a customer who is looking to remove his presence from on-premises data center and want a cloud-first approach. So they have their ERP product, which is core of their business and having a multiple users, and they can't afford a downtime as well as they can't afford any kind of interruption in their business process. One restriction is there that they don't need to take their DR out of the country, because they have decided they are not going to build or even put the DR on their on premises. So the next best solution utilizing AWS cloud is we build their multi-availability production DR strategy. So in a single AZ, their ERP, their production is running, and we have enabled the MS SQL always on group, so that the real-time replication is happening of the database on the another availability zone, and application we are taking the frequent backup so that we will get a maximum data, and the RPO and RTO can be reduced if in case of any failure happen. And we tested this as a regularly drill. So that is where like the power of AWS came into picture, that we can test it and tried and tested quickly and see whether if there is any kind of interruption or like what kind of time it will take to achieve our RTO and RPO defined by the business. So a couple of things, because it's in the AWS network, so replication is happening in a blink of eyes, because the network is so fast and it is lying on the AWS network. Near real-time kind of failover have achieved, and again the cost saving happen here, because rather than putting the DR on the hybrid approach or on premises, it is on AWS, as well as for the application, as it is not running every time, we are just taking the application backup in case of a drill, as well as if any real-time issue occur on the primary side, then only case we are running the application instance on the DR side. So that is where the cost saving happen for this customer. So Karthik,
thank you, Chirag. Yeah, thank you, Chirag. I think this is one of the case studies which we want, we really wanted to explain to most of all the audience. And the value here is, right, so, a lot of times customers get fixated on terminologies and, the DR sites being separate, physically very far apart from each other. And while that is true, the more important thing is, how do you achieve the backups? What is the next best solution? Here we had a constraint. I think a lot of businesses might have this constraint about data, regulatory data, right? So data cannot be stored outside the country. Most of the cloud back in other regions are outside India. So, but here's a solution where we spoke about, how do you achieve a failover? How do you achieve the best possible disaster recovery scenario given your circumstances, right? And that's important. And this has been this is one of our best examples. I think we have seen, not necessarily, thank God, fortunately it's not been a big disaster, but we have seen some outages and we've been able to flip through seamlessly, as Chirag said, literally using the word as a cliche, like seamlessly, very, very quickly, because everything is in the cloud. While customers have, this applies to both, right? So there are customers who already have their primary workloads on cloud, like this customer. For them, it's a no-brainer, right? Having a better scenario inside. But even for customers who do not have a migrate to cloud plan yet, right? One of the things that our customer CIOs and CTOs found easiest to start the topic of cloud within their investments and their management and board is get the DR on the cloud first, because that's the best path, right? And then it's an easy conversation once the management or the core company looks at what the cloud brings. It's visible, it's tangible. And then, start talking about migrating your core applications and data. And then obviously you can close down your data centers. That's, I think, is a great approach. And I think DR on cloud is probably for many customers, the easiest way to get started on the cloud. Thank you, Chirag.
Yes, thank you.
Back to you.
So yeah, so that's also from my side. And I would like to go to the Q&A part now.
Thank you. Thanks, Karthik, Gaurav, and Chirag. Thanks for the lively session. A lot of questions have been coming in, asking whether they'll get a recorded session of this webinar. The answer for that is yes. After the webinar is over, in a few hours, you should be receiving a recording of this webinar on your email. So you can look up for that. Now, we have a couple of questions here, but if anybody else has any other questions, please feel free. One question that has come in is somebody is asking, is there any limitation for bring your own license? Gaurav, would you like to answer
yeah.
that?
Yes, Priya, I'll take it. So there are a couple of things. I believe this we are talking with respect to workspaces, and this is for, say, I want to bring my Windows 10, bring your own license model. First, you need to have that Microsoft licensing agreement allows you to move the licenses to the cloud. That's one aspect. And I think the second aspect is on the minimum number of licenses which needs to be ported in. I think the details are available on our Workspaces FAQ page. So I'll suggest to have a read through on the Windows BYOL section on the Workspaces FAQ page. Supriya, if that helps answer the question.
Yeah. Thank you, Gaurav. One more question that has come in is how many days retention backup do we have to maintain in incremental backup?
I can take that one as well. I believe this should be, say, I can take it, say, to give example, it could be, say, an EBS snapshot. So I'm taking snapshot backup of my EBS. And then the way EBS snapshot works is it's an incremental backup, which means I take a backup today, that will be my full backup. And I take a backup next day, that will be a backup of only the change blocks. So we don't take a full backup the next day. So these are incremental change data blocks, and each snapshot in itself is capable enough to restore a volume. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Basically, when we say it's only the change blocks which are covered in day 2 or day 3 or day n of the snapshot, it's basically a pointers to the data. So whenever we delete a snapshot, all the data blocks which were unique to that snapshot only gets deleted, but the individual snapshots are good enough to recover the data completely to a new EBS volume. To give you a short answer, if I have an incremental backup, say, of 3 days, and if I take away the first and second day of snapshot, will my third snapshot be good enough to recover the full volume? Yes, that would be.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
Thank you
Gaurav.
so
I
much.
think in our experience, to add to that, Supriya and Gaurav, is also that for larger ERPs, and I'll take particular example of SAP. Most of our customers in our experience, I've seen, maybe it's to do with the general practice before. They do a typical 6-day incremental backup. On the 7th day, they take a full backup, right? And that's something we've seen with many customers. But having Gaurav's answer is spot on, right? So technically, we could go deleting the previous ones. The last incremental snapshot should work. But in general practice, we've seen 6+1, right? Saturday night weekly backup, and the first 6 days of incremental backups is what you see. Thank you.
Maybe just to add from my side also in the same regard. So it also depend upon the business call that what kind of, if there is some kind of compliance need to be achieved. So we can follow again with the industry pattern of GFS, like grandfather, father and son. For the backup strategy, the retention can be in a yearly or monthly or weekly, that kind of things can be designed in each kind of scenario, whether it's a EBS backup or the object level backup on S3. That is where the Glacier kind of storage class come into picture and play its major role. Yes. Yeah.
Thanks for all your inputs. Moving on, there's one more question. How the users are assigned to specific AWS workspace desktop as a service. So the question says something like static IP for each node. Is that how it works?
Okay, I think there are two parts to the question. One is how the users are assigned to a specific AWS workspace desktop as a service. So basically, when you provision a workspace, you define a user which will be assigned to that workspace. So that's on the provisioning side of things. Each workspace gets one static IP. That's also correct.
Okay, great. I hope that answers your question,
and team, feel free to put up a subsequent question if that it doesn't answer your question fully. So we'll be happy to answer that.
Yeah. There's another anonymous question that has come in. What kind of network requirements from remote locations are required for someone who's running a 3D design and engineering kind of workloads and wants to run remote teams? What would you suggest?
So I can take this one as well. There are two parts. So let's assume there are workspaces, there are AppStream. So for workspaces, we have a network health check dashboard. Maybe what I'll do is in the subsequent, while somebody answers the other questions, I'll put a link to that, which you can run from your on-premise or from your client location, which will give you a round trip time to certain different regions which are running into the cloud to give you a network latency factor. That's one aspect. In terms of the minimum bandwidth requirement, we have specified that clearly in our documentation for both workspaces and graphics application running on AppStream. I don't recollect the number on top of my head, but I'll try to find and then share a link on the chat window. It should be roughly in the range of 1 MB plus or something for graphic application for sure.
Okay. There's one more question that has come in. I'm not sure whether I will, if you can see, Gaurav. It says day one, we sent full backup of Oracle EBS database. Is it possible to send only the incremental data so that we will be retrieving the full database? I'm a bit unclear about the question.
Right. I think the question, I think if I understand it, and Senthil Kumar, you can probably send out a detail as well if it doesn't answer. Let me take a stab at it. It's like saying, we started with the full backup, right? Let's say on Sunday, and then subsequently we send incremental data. We do incremental backups every other day. And then if we need to retrieve on, let's say day 5, what happens? So it's very, very similar to a typical, database backup process where we do a full backup, but then you apply the other logs. And Gaurav can add to that, but it's very similar to that. So yes, we can retrieve the full with the full backup, the last full backup plus incremental snapshots.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct, Karthik.
Okay. Gaurav has also shared the link to the AppStream recommendation that he was just talking about. So you all can check out on your chat window. You can get the link to that. One more question that has come in is DR or HA available for Oracle RDS apart from multi-AZ? If yes, how do we implement that?
So I can take this one. So is DR and HA available for Oracle RDS? So RDS multi-AZ give you an HA basically. So maybe just to elaborate more, so Oracle, RDS Oracle, if I go with a multi-AZ configuration, which means I have one active node which is taking my read and write requests, and I have one passive node which basically covering my HA capabilities there. From a DR perspective, again, I think coming back to Chirag's point, DR solution depends what kind of RTO and RPO values you are looking at, what kind of cost investment you are looking at. But DR solutions are available, whether it's taking an Oracle dump itself, or I take a snapshot of a Oracle database and then move it to some other region, or create a read replica out of the RDS family altogether. There are different options which are available, which you can kind of look at.
Great. Okay. I think we have just answered this question, Senthil. There's another. I think it's a follow-on to his question, the earlier question. He wants to know if after a week he wants to retrieve, what size will be the data? If he does on the day 1, if he does a 450 GB full Oracle DB backup, and he does a 50 GB incremental DB backup.
So 450 GB day 1, 50 GB incremental, and I believe there are 50 GB getting added on to your 450. So it will be 450 plus 50 into 6. That will be your incremental size. Assuming there is no overlap, they are completely different data sets.
Right. So assuming it's not updates, it's right. It's purely add-ons.
Purely
also, just to add to that is the combination. If you're talking about specifically Oracle or any databases, right? So the way to think about is snapshots are a great way, but ideally for most of the customers, we also do a cold, right? So you should the scripting also involves your database level backups. So if you can do that, nothing like that, because Oracle also enables the database level backups. That'll be good as well.
Great. I hope that answers your question, Senthil. If there are any other questions, please feel free.
please bear in mind that we'll also try to capture these answers and, for the benefit of everybody else who's attended, we'll try to post them as well. And if there's any questions that's not answered, feel free to reach out to, I think there's an email given at the bottom of the screen. Feel free to shoot out your questions and we'll be glad to answer them.
Supriya, I've just shared one more link on the DR strategy
Yes.
or implementing a DR for Amazon RDS in general. I think that should be useful for the attendees.
Yes, thank you, Gaurav. So we'll just wait for a minute to see if there are any other questions, and if not, then I think I would like to thank all of you for sharing your thoughts. It was really a very eye-opening and very timely, topic that we need. All companies are right now thinking of, and this is something which will probably set the stage for the next phase of cloud enablement for a lot of companies. Okay, somebody has asked for a bit more elaboration on S3 intelligent tiering.
Okay, I'll
Gaurav?
take that. Yeah, I'll take that. So basically, in what happens in S3, when you push the data into S3, you have to specify the standard, the storage class, which could be say a standard or a standard infrequent access or a glacier. What happens when customers try to do that? They don't know the access pattern, and then there are a lot of customers which came back to us which have a very high volumes of S3. What storage class should I go in? And I have to keep on monitoring what my data should fit into the right class so that I optimize cost. That's where we came out with intelligent tiering. Basically, then that decision, whatever of moving the data into different storage classes based on their access pattern is taken by the service itself, and you don't need to go and manually define. Keep on defining the based on access pattern to the service. You can do this using say a lifecycle policy, but I just don't want to stick with the lifecycle policy for a lot of other objects. I can then simply go ahead and use say intelligent tiering. So I'll share one more link which basically explain that tiering in detail to help you understand exactly what the service does. But in a nutshell, it basically helps take away the decision control of you and take away that pain of managing the whole decision matrix with you to the service, and then service kind of takes a call on your behalf.
Thanks, Gaurav. One more question that has just come in is, how many days backup can we restore from a point in time?
It actually depends on the service. If we can get the name of the service, we can then maybe answer a bit better. Normally, it's like I said earlier, take snapshot with an incremental. What you need is only one single snapshot to recover the whole the volume together. Or say Chirag or Karthik, if you have anything to add, because it's a pretty open-ended question to give you a kind of
Naveen,
specific answer.
if you can give a bit more detail about which service exactly you're talking about.
Yes, it depends on service to services. Yeah, agree.
One question that has just come in is for workspaces or for AppStream, does AWS take care of high availability? Basically, in case a VDI machine goes down, how soon does it get restored?
Yeah, so work for both the services, these are managed services, which means we take care of the availability of the service. There is a certain SLAs which we provide on these services, and we kind of replenish the VM in the background in case of there is a physical host failure. So normally it becomes like an AppStream, to give you an example, because that's a practical example I have tried myself. For me, if I have to, my VM has some issues and it has to be taken care by AWS. For a user, I just need to reconnect. I don't do anything beyond that. And that helps me to land to some other VM in the pool and gets my work started.
A backup, I think a follow on to that same question is that what happens to the data that is being worked upon if in the event of a failure, will the last state be restored?
Okay, so in the event of a failure, normally we take continuous snapshots. So there is a certain frequency of snapshot. I don't recollect exactly what the frequency is. The worst case would be you recover back to the latest, the last snapshot state. But these are EBS volumes, just to remind you, and EBS volumes can be reattached to any other VMs. So that's something which we can run as a POC and then you kind of see how it works for you. because it actually depends on a lot of things, depend on what kind of data and what kind of work we're doing and what kind of architecture we should need to build in to keep the data available to you at the highest possible degree. Karthik, I think you want to share something, or you?
No, I think I was going to agree. So I was just going to say, from a desktop perspective, it's almost, I would say, similar to what happens with your regular desktop, right?
Yes.
So at that point in time, so whatever gets saved, let's say you're working on a Word document inside, that particularly depends on that application inside. But other than that, the minute level backup of the state level backup will be restored when it fails. Remember, we're talking about two things here. One is the application inside the desktop. One is the desktop state which is being backed up. So to answer your question, at that point in time, so whenever the crash happens, let's say there's a crash that's happened, it'll be restored exactly to that point.
That's reassuring. So I think we are kind of coming to the end of this webinar. If anybody has any other questions, please feel free to shoot us an email at contact@cloud-kinetics.com. As I had mentioned before, you will get a recording of this webinar in your emails, and we'll also be available to answer any questions, follow-on questions that you might have. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for, we hope you enjoyed the session, and we look forward to having you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Karthik. Thank you,
Have a good
Gaurav.
day.
Thank you, Chirag.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.
Stay
Bye-bye.
safe, everybody. Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.